Hey everyone, Mike Miller with the Herald Times, joined by basketball columnist Jeremy Price. Coming to you, as you can see, Bankers Life Fieldhouse, the Crossroads Classic. I think it's the sixth year for this event. Makes sense.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, thereabouts.
lost
I'm
track.
pretty sure it's the sixth year. Anyway, coming to you after a 83-78 Indiana loss to Butler, Indiana's second loss of the year, and I don't really want to go back to the Fort Wayne loss, but again, I think that in some ways you saw some of the same themes reemerge in this one. Just lack of attention to detail, by and large, I think was really the big problem defensively for Indiana. Shots weren't falling in the first half. Indiana didn't hit its first three-pointer until, I think, the 18:35 mark in the second half, at which point they were 1 for 9 on the day. On the other hand, Butler was, I think, 7 for 14 at that point, 7 for 14 at half. And that early was one of the big differences, but also defensively, too. I just thought that, we've written and spoken about how it seems at least they've started the year at a higher point defensively than, of course, they've been at the last couple of years, maybe in a long time. But this was just kind of uncharacteristically absent, the defensive approach that we've seen at times this year. Indiana, which has been so good defending the three-pointer, was not good at all today. Keelan Martin just kind of scored at will. He had 28 points. And you throw in there Andrew Travis and Kamar Baldwin. They each had 14. And then, of course, Tyler Wideman only had, 8, but a couple of them were pretty key points there at both in the early and late stages of the second half. So just kind of a disconnected, disjointed performance from Indiana today.
Yeah, this is one of those games where, each game is its own game, but you couldn't help for a multitude of reasons to flashing back to several other games when you're looking at this one. First of all, the Fort Wayne game as it relates to this team, because of just the sort of the lack of energy, the lack of focus, the lack of toughness, frankly, that we kind of chalked up as an aberration that game, and OG Anunoby was sick and, all these things. And then it kind of shows up again today, and it's like if this team doesn't come out and knock down some shots right off the bat, sometimes it's just not there for them for whatever the reason may be. And Tom Crean was definitely questioning the defensive toughness, the defensive mindset. Obviously, the other game that this flashes back to is the game against Notre Dame here last year, when Indiana also was behind by 16 points, came back to win that game, which turned out to be sort of a catalyst that projected the season forward from there. Today, fall down 16 early in the second half, almost came back, but, very different situation, very different circumstances. Last year that team just needed something positive to build on. Mm-hmm. This year's team already has plenty positive to build on. Now this sort of chips away a little bit at what you thought that they'd sort of built to this point. And like you mentioned earlier, with the defense being subpar and everything, sort of calls into question, where that progression is really at, and is it as much as we thought it was to this point, or is it maybe been masked by the level of opponents that they've largely played? Because when you go back to that Kansas game, the defense wasn't exactly spectacular that game. I mean, that was a very offensive-minded game in and of itself. The North Carolina game was a really good defensive game, and obviously the intervening cupcakes have been really good defensive games. But now you've got 3 major games, and 2 of them have been subpar defensive games for Indiana.
Talk about flashing back and forth to some of the previous games. I wasn't on the beat at the time, but I remember watching the game in 2013, that loss at Illinois. We saw, I guess, a shade of that come back with about 15 seconds left. You mentioned the 16-point deficit. Well, I guess you could also credit Indiana for coming back and chipping away at that. James Blackman he had some big shots down the stretch. I think 16 of his 26 points came in his final 16 minutes of action today. Indiana gets within 2 with about 38 seconds left. But anyway, there's an inbound pass along the baseline. Tyler Wideman just gets free of Thomas Bryant, who this is kind of disappointing too when you kind of talk about, yesterday we were talking to Tom Crean about all the growth we've seen from Thomas Bryant since the Fort Wayne game, just both defensively and especially just in leadership ways. You can't have that happen if you're Thomas Bryant, especially with all the progress you've made. I mean, you talk about taking steps forward this season. That's, it's one moment, but it's a big moment. And you can't let that happen in that situation. You can't let your guy lose you in that situation.
It's not uncommon for there to be miscommunications and mistakes on an inbounds play. But what you can't make is the mistake or the miscommunication that results in a wide open layup or dunk. And like you said, that definitely was shades of Tyler Griffey in 2013 at Illinois when Indiana lost there as a number one team. Mm-hmm. Biggest difference here, there was still 15 seconds left, but it made it a 4-point game and for all intents and purposes, put it away. But, you mentioned, credit this team for coming back, but that's not really a surprise that this team was able to come back. They've got the skill, they've got the talent, they've got the ability to put a run like that together to be able to come back, no more so than it was any surprise that they came back against Fort Wayne. I mean, they were down double digits late in that game and came back and got it into overtime. So there's no questioning this team's ability to come back. The questioning is, why are they putting themselves in that position in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, we speak about defense. We'll start with offense in this realm. Josh Newkirk today got the start. OG Anunoby's back. He played He played 16 minutes or.
How did it wind up? He played 10 in the first half.
26. That's
16 in the second half.
16 in the second half.
Yeah.
Because he started. He got the nod over Josh Newkirk, who just had a dreadful first half, just forcing shots that were essentially turnovers, many of them. 0 for 6. I think he had 2 turnovers, 1 assist at halftime.
Yeah.
Just really, it was for a team that still was looking for its legs. He was a real problem area for that team. But I would say also in the second half, as we saw at one point when Indiana did kind of slow down Keelan Martin, Newkirk was the guy who was on him.
Well, your story today kind of touched on the inconsistencies of this game for Indiana, and I don't think there's anybody that embodied that more than Josh Newkirk today. I mean, I thought early on he was aggressive going to the rim, and even though he wasn't scoring, he was the one that was instigating the plays that led to Thomas Bryant had a couple of dunk putbacks off of his misses. Mm-hmm. He had one nice drop-off pass for Bryant early on, and then as the half went on, like you said, it just got to be a rash of bad decisions. Even if he was only credited with 2 turnovers, it felt more like 10, basically. And then in the second half, after not starting, he comes in and sort of really redeems his day with the job he did on Keelan Martin down the stretch of this game. I mean, what he did was basically took away that outside shot, forced Martin to be able to put it on the floor, make him uncomfortable for the first time all day, and was the only guy that really was able to do that. OG Anunoby had his moments against Martin. He was probably better than anybody else besides Newkirk as far as that goes. But I thought maybe it was a little bit revealing. I'm not sure. It was pretty clear, I thought, that OG was mostly himself, but particularly at the defensive end, I didn't think he was quite full speed. And that's where it's going to show up the most, that lateral movement, that push-off on that ankle. So no surprise there. But, yeah, Newkirk sort of redeemed himself with his defense down the stretch. But once again, sort of his play earlier in the game was what helped dig Indiana the hole that it was in the first place there. So it's sort of a yin and yang.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, from here, back Monday, that is that Delaware State?
That is Delaware State,
Delaware
yes.
State, yeah. There's two cupcake games left before.
And then Austin Peay.
Austin Peay, and then Merry Christmas.
Yes.
And then we're right back up. Well, no, there's the Nebraska game. Then we're back up here for Louisville on New Year's Eve. So we'll be back up here in
2 weeks.
Short order, 2 weeks. Yeah, by that time, that'll be the last non-conference game. Although, again, I guess it kind of falls in an awkward spot there with that Nebraska game preceding it. But still another chance to get a really, really nice win.
And a little bigger game now because, Indiana was in a good shape with 2, you thought of these 4 games. The minimum you'd want is 2 out of them. Right. They've got the 2, but it would feel a little empty to go 2-0 against Kansas and North Carolina and then to go 0-2 against Butler and Louisville. Yeah. So that'll be a big game in 2 weeks.
Yep, 2 weeks. So we'll be back here. Right now we're going to try to get home. Try is the operative word here. Hopefully we can do some more Scoop Talks this season. That's going to require us to get home safely and in one piece, alive and well. Wish us luck because it is nasty outside. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thanks, guys, for watching. We will touch base soon.
See ya.